Hi there, and welcome to the Curious Collective podcast. Conversations designed for the conscious community to create an awareness around holistic practices to help you live your best life. So, I want you to tap into the knowledge and wisdom of our guests to heal, transform, and live as your true soulful self. Today, we are absolutely blessed to have with us the beautiful Sarah Yip, Numbers Queen. And I'm going to pass it straight over because she has a lot of wisdom to share with us. Can you please tell us what it is that you do and what makes your heart sing?
Oh, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on, Katie. Really enjoyed getting to know you recently, and it's so cool that we have the same life path, number 11. It must be fate. What makes my heart sing? It's just a lot of things, to be honest. Food, kids, cloud, angels. But in terms of my business, I guess, I love helping families to understand each other so that they can drop the BS that they've been carrying for how many generations. And I love to do that by really precise work, often with the numerology, palmistry, other things, so that they can see that they chose each other, that they have lessons to learn, and actually when those things need to happen, so that there's a bit of a plan, basically.
I love that because so many parents are feeling, in conversations I've been having recently, really quite lost with, I don't really know how to support my children best. And we all have the best intentions for them, but can feel quite helpless or overwhelmed by it. How would your
Yes.
work help that?
Well, I'd say that's why I've gotten into what I do. Is I did feel quite misunderstood as a child, and I've certainly worked with thousands of people who could relate to that. And it can set off this ripple effect where you just are not open to help, and it's dangerous. It's a slippery slope. So the way it can help is basically by allowing your intuition to reactivate. You have spiritual literacy. So you've got to think of children, they come with this guidebook, this instruction pack. But if you have been trained through whatever mass hypnosis to be illiterate, unable to read the signs, or even believing that reading the signs is evil or wicked, then essentially you get the child and the guidebook, you throw out the guidebook without a second thought. And then later on you fumble along and everyone else is fumbling along and you just think, wow, this is a really hard way to do it, but this is how you do it. So it's a bit sad, I think, even just the languaging around a psychic, intuitive, this type of work, it's very loaded and it triggers people. So right from the beginning, we're working against huge odds. We're just working against huge odds. Honestly, what I try to do, I use this word magic so that we relabel things. For example, just a slightly different topic, but you have your mind. So people say, oh, I'm always in my head or my mind. And I might say something like, oh, the healer of your heart or your heart's best friend, and they're like, what? Huh? And I think, well, we have these terms that are so charged. Why not just use a different term? Bring a freshness to it. So instead of calling it your child, people say things, oh, my angel, my greatest teacher. And I'm like, it's making me want to throw up slightly. I would say something like your new employee. Or, just for fun, just mix it up. Or, your colleague or, your buddy from 3 lifetimes ago, and just mix it up, because children come in not knowing we have to be so limited. And the more I do past life work and numerology work and the telepathy work with my own children, it is like there's these sort of 2 levels of people, the people who honestly think that we come and it's just random. And then the people who are busy trying to regain their abilities and use them.
So do you use the numbers and numerology in order to work intuitively with the children?
Look, for me, the numbers came first in terms of I have a science degree and I've always been a facts and figures person. And I like them because they're so concrete and you can't argue with them. And in fact, that is the type of person I often work with, who see those repeating numbers on receipts, license plates, in places that they could never usually be found, because it's this proof, basically, that there's a matrix and there's an order. So I've always loved the groundedness of numbers. In terms of using it for intuition, it's not something I ever planned to do consciously. I believe, though, that it was my soul mission. I just wasn't in contact with that for like 30 years. So basically, when I'm doing a chart, I have thousands of charts. I might just pull out one of the folders.
Yeah, awesome.
So, I have thousands and thousands of those charts. I always do the chart first, and I meditate before I meet the person. I don't have to if it's a short reading, but if it's going to be, a proper journey together, I am very aware that it doesn't matter how much work you've done on yourself, you can still be prone to bias and judgment. So by having it there on the paper, talking them through it, the technique creates the accuracy.
And it helps to work to all the different learning styles as well on the participants' end, if they're seeing it visually, hearing it from you, I guess, as well.
We get a lot of feelings on the calls or in the experiences as well. The guides I work with are very touchy-feely, and I would guarantee, people even listening to this or watching it 100%, if you are open to it, you're going to get the goosebumps or truth bumps, as my friend Bill says. The warmth, the tingles, and the knowings, because this information is basically your right to know.
Well, I'd just love to talk into, just for an example, just something you worked out with me as I was talking about my beautiful child, Claire, my youngest, and you said, well, what's her birth date? And took that down and did a little figures or whatever you were doing. You can talk into it in a second in front of you. And you told me her life path number and so much information just off her birth date. I would love to know a little bit more about that.
So the birth date is something that we choose, even if it was a cesarean or things like that have happened. There's still an order to this process. The birth date is designed to be the key that unlocks your soul contract.
That fascinates me.
Yeah, if you choose to learn basic numerology, which you can literally do in half an hour, which we probably will be doing today, it will set off a chain reaction, and this is where people need the support. The teaching of numerology, it's bog standard, like we'll talk about, with the chakras and the numbers. The challenge is that people are terrified of taking it further because they think the big bad wolf will come for them. They don't realize that this is the one thing that can kill the big bad wolf, which is that fear of death, fear of, sort of mistakes and, losing or wasting time in your life. So, the fear block is actually a bigger issue with this work than anything else. The numbers, the arithmetic can be done by like a 5 to 8 year old. I have plenty of children who come in and they are just dancing around their parents with this stuff straight away. They know their life paths. Their parents are the ones who struggle. They're like, it can't be that easy. And there's so many empty promises in the spiritual industry. It's sometimes challenging to distinguish myself. It helps that I look like a librarian or accountant. But it's still a challenge for me, because there's just so many people who say this is the secret, this is the holy grail.
This is really interesting stuff. I would love to get into the numerology and the chakras and the stuff that you do, but before we get to that, I would really love to ask you, how did you get into this line of work, and how did you start to develop where you're at today?
Right, so I guess if we just sort of jump around a few of the key events. My background is very different to most people. So my parents are migrants and refugees, and their absolute focus was for us to be doctors, lawyers, look after the family. You're going to laugh. The garbage truck has just come by. So it looks like we'll need to leave behind some of the past in this call. So the first thing is, as a child, I was always good at simple sums. And I often had this idea that I was destined to use it, but I didn't know why. Now, of course, being Asian, that's pretty bog standard. But I always felt there was some, greater reason for me having this gift. I could just always get to the crux of things. I was a prodigy, so it meant that I couldn't relate to my peer group most of my life, or there was a lot of bullying. And that's been positive, because for me to stay on the planet, I had to find my reason. I couldn't go off other people's approval or praise or support. It had to be like, there has to be a damn good reason for me to keep being this sensitive. And I found it pretty early. And it was, for me, it was that sort of prayer meditation, which at the time was, you know, through religion. But I just knew that there was this greater consciousness from an early age. And I used to challenge my scripture teacher, even as a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And I found a lot of my clients are the same. I had a client this week, apparently, yeah, when she was in primary school, she said to her friend, God is not in this church. So there was that behind everything. But I have to admit, I still went on to science and government, all the sort of mundane things, because I really wanted to be important. That's always been a big thing for me until recently. And I guess what changed it is I just had a whole bunch of disasters, and it was very Monty Python, more painful. But, you know, there was breakups, there was a tsunami, you know, losing career, losing health, anorexia, just everything toppled down, essentially a very severe quarter-life crisis. And I lost my ability to remember. So I had a photographic memory, so you could give me a textbook and I'd just be like, poof.
Oh, wow, handy.
Exam, whoop, and forget it the next day. But then it got to the point I couldn't remember like 5 digits. So that was drastic for me, and I needed, at that point, you know, I'd lost the house, partner, career, everything, and I just was floating around. This was part of my spiritual awakening. So this happened around 2011.
Oh, wow.
On that day was when I had my biggest crisis.
Oh, wow.
And that's also around the time I started seeing repeating numbers. So I needed a way of earning an income. I had been dabbling in palm reading and this kind of stuff. And I found, amazingly, that I could still do readings despite being half starved, half mad. I just had this unbelievable, I had no idea I had it, sort of ability to read people. Now that I know I have autism, it makes more sense, because most of my life I have been studying others at a microscopic detail just to stay in society. So I think that plus my interest in all these spiritual topics has blended together nicely. So yeah, lots of crises. Numerology didn't come till later. I've actually always considered myself more of a palm reader and body language person. But what I discovered is the lines just keep changing, and for me that was a bit frustrating. It's nice because it shows you free will and the chakras will change, and, you know, shows healing, but I wanted something that was like super concrete, you know, that could blow people's socks off, didn't matter who they were. I wanted something that could even convince me, you know, that there was this sort of God energy. Now, just let you know, there's a big truck outside my window. Hang on.
It's sabotaging us.
Well, yes and no. It always seems to come at this appropriate time. There's always this appropriate time. And we often have to go out and wave to them.
Thank you, truck.
Yeah, well, you know, it's literally a shitty job. So sorry, where I was is essentially I was standing in a bookshop in Brisbane at the relaxation centre, and somebody bought me this book. It was called The Life You're Born to Live by Dan Millman. It's a very famous book. It's got, you know, the 45 life paths in there in great detail. So that was part of my awakening. It happened when I was 29, which was my turning point as a 2911 life path. And around that time, I'd also bought a book for a couple of bucks at a discount shop. And those 2 books alone actually got me into numerology. I went home and I did the charts of everyone I knew. I discovered there was just a lot of palindromes, a lot of the same life path. And literally almost all of my close healers and therapists were 11s like me.
Oh, wow.
So the proof was indisputable. It's one of the reasons I encourage people to find their life path, do their family, do the friends, do the partner, and just sit with the information, because actually that alone can be quite confronting. Because very often the people who trigger us have the same life path.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It would make complete sense. Their shadow side irritates the heck out of ours. So, for example, I have a real thing about women receiving the credit for their work, paying themselves more attention and money, getting comfortable with making a big deal. You know, this is all financial languaging and word magic. And I would often get attacked in the early days for daring to charge anything for what I did. And then even when I would just charge small amounts, there was always this fist fight Now, having come from a background of fundraising, we knew from huge amounts of research, people are flattered to be asked for lots of money. If it's for a good cause, it's like someone asking you to marry them. You never forget it.
Yeah.
Even if you think they're a bit cray-cray, but you wouldn't forget it, right? It's that, if someone came up and said, I believe you're capable of this kind of relationship and responsibility. So there's just certain, whether it's ego or soul calling, that when you call people at that level, they're like, could I do that? And fundraising, like, it's very science-based, data-based, and they showed time and time again, ask high. Ask high, don't go in low, don't go in at $2. Those are the people who don't have money on their credit cards, or they let it bounce, they don't fill in the forms. And those people, like, it's always going to be hard work. This is like someone you have to pay to take you on a date. But does that make sense? Start really strong. Anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm getting a bit sidetracked, but essentially books, and there was always a lot of signs. Sorry about that. I get a bit like, woohoo.
I love it. I love what conversation just flows, because it's meant to be said, right?
Look, I honestly didn't intend originally to do numbers, but not a lot of people do them, to be honest, and I did see a niche, and it was the same with the palm reading. And of course, being Asian, there was this stereotype that I would be a maths person. I'm actually also an English person. I've got all these other qualifications, but when they see me, like I said, they see an accountant. And so I play up to that. I'm like, well, let's check out your karmic debt.
Love that.
Why not? I mean, if this is what I look like, it must mean that I needed it. This is what I chose when I was choosing the avatars. And I can see enormous benefit. Firstly, people remember me because I'm that bogan speaking Asian lady. And, I chose to be 6 foot tall, which is like top 1% of Asians. So then people are like, are you a guy? What did you eat? Like, are you sure you're not a mix? There's always those icebreakers with me, which means I can get in there and do my spiritual work.
I love how down to earth you are. It is from the moment I met you, I'm like, I like this woman.
Oh, thanks. Well, to be honest, every time I tried to develop an ego, it got effectively trampled on. And I've often questioned that, actually, why in my early life there was so much sense of pressure and pushing. And now I understand, because in that spaciousness in me, I'm able to now put the client's chart or energy and then go, whoa, this is what makes you tick. So it's fascinating to look back on it and say it was really clever, actually, how it happened. I was never able to develop a lot of confidence. So I was always looking for a way to serve and sort of be accepted. And like I said, I have this kind of compartment in me where it's like the floppy disk from the old computers, and I go, and there wouldn't have been space for that, to be honest, if I'd probably been, really healthy and confident, self-expressed. I would probably have never looked or bothered or cared. It's hard to say if that's totally true, but that's how I'm doing it for me at the moment.
Yeah. I love all of that. I love the analogy of the floppy disk too. That works perfectly.
Well, I always loved how they were really big so you could find them. I'm always losing USBs and generally finding them in my 1-year-old's mouth, and he's like,
oh no.
So
now, you mentioned back when you were 29 was when you started seeing repeated numbers. I know a lot of the people within the conscious community and the curious collective community are seeing the repeated numbers, especially the ones, and I'm one of them. I'm just getting absolutely bombarded with them at the moment. So are you able to talk into that a little bit, or give some guidance around it?
That's right. So the equivalent is, if someone came up to you and spoke in a language other than English, you have a few options. You could wave and smile and be like, that was nice. You could be like, go over there, that person speaks your language. Or you could learn it. Now, I must say, I see a lot of people say, too hard. It's too hard. Oh, it's nice that you've come up to me. Oh, I feel very special now. And I mean, it's like someone knocking at your door and you never let them in to have a cup of water. So I sometimes actually feel grief. I feel grief because I feel that there's been a lot of cashing in on this kind of stuff where it's like, oh, you see the code, you must be my twin flame. Oh, it's $11, I have to buy it. So do you see what I mean? Where it's the spiritual information has been truncated or like cropped. just to actually make it more addictive for you to get into capitalism and stuff. So what's the other side of that? The other side is freaking learn numerology. Like, honestly, it's free. It's free. I have webinars of, which are a bit deeper, but the majority of the stuff it's free. What it will cost you though is it'll cost you your preconceptions and your fear of maths. A lot of people have a fear of maths because the way it was taught in school was very punitive. You get the wrong answer, you go down a grade. But in numerology, you just get an answer. There is no judgment around it.
I love that link. I love that link you've made there. For me, I always tell myself, like, I don't like maths. I don't do maths. English is my thing. And when you just said that, then I'm like, that's me.
Women are very good at mathematics. Women are brilliant at sizing people up, adjusting their energy to match other people's vibration. They're brilliant at remembering how many times someone has said, please or thank you, how many times their kid has pooed. Women are brilliant at mathematics. But if that's a word that triggers you, don't call it that. Call it mathematics.
I like that.
Just call it something else. Call it, the truth or whatever, fun with numbers. But don't let it stop you, because maths is the key to, the matrix. We know that the universe can be measured and broken down. You want to talk directly to the matrix and to consciousness, this is the way. You don't need a middle person. You don't need somebody censoring you. You can just directly ask for stuff and it comes back. And that's what the codes are. The codes are a reply from the universe to a message you sent out. But if you don't know how to translate it, it's like spamming God. I want this, I want this, I want this. Why is it not coming? So apart from the awareness of numerology, we need to combine that with some sort of guided meditation, not just the one where you lie there and you're happy. That's good. But that's like lying at the hotel door and never going into the lobby. Guided meditation where you're like, okay, what are you talking about? And that's where we have to overcome that fear of being incredibly powerful. That potentially, that we are talking directly to God consciousness or angel or whatever you want to call them. People just flip out at that point. And in an ideal world, they would go see someone who actually knew what it was. But I think a lot of them just back down and they go back to just sharing memes and stuff. So if you're willing to have that conversation, whether you want it to be with your higher self, guides, past ever loved ones, and you're willing to accept the signs as numbers, it's amazing. There's this whole journey that happens. Often a whole bunch of businesses, sometimes, children, whole new tribes. There's this whole new world on the other side of that fear of getting precise about what you want, which is what maths is.
I feel this whiteness inside of me as you're talking about that. It's like, am I willing to, people listening to this are curious, right? That's why they listen to this. But are you willing to take that next step? Because that's what's going to get you, answers, more answers.
It's just about being more precise. A lot of us have been taught to be very vague with our wishes because we don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to offend Santa Claus or our parents or our teachers. So we make it wishy-washy so that we can't be too wrong and that they can feel really smart. And so I suppose for me, having teachers who wanted me to be the best in the world, and I suppose parents really at that level, I don't have that fear of growing beyond authority, and I actually quite enjoy working with people who I suppose you'd say they're at the top of society, whether it's Olympic athletes or politicians or doctors. I like talking to them because they're usually people who've had to think about what they're doing. I like that match. You don't have to have that to become a numerologist. It's best used in your own personal life. The best use of it is to help yourself understand your timeline, to do your own autobiography, to look at your kids, your parents. That alone would be my dream, if more and more people knew their life path the way they knew their sun sign in astrology.
And you'd get so much out of it. And looking at the children for me is something that I'm like, yes, that needs to happen, because this could really ease the burden of that confusion around parenting that we were speaking about at the start of the call.
That's right. So numerology, especially around the date of birth and the name, both birth name and current legal name, essentially gives you the soul contract. If you know how to decipher it, if you have the permissions, which I believe you kind of earn through doing ethical work with this information, because people can block you, spirit can block you, if you're going to use it just like I said to cash cow people. It gives you this child's soul contract. So it's incredibly sacred information. I think that's why a lot of people will never do this work. But like I said, even just a little bit from the right source, something that's actually accurate and objective could still help a lot of people. But it is a calling. And once you get into this stuff, as you probably noticed with me, it is 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, I have people come in my dreams to do their numerology.
Oh gosh. That's
People
exhausting.
say you should just turn off, and that's easy for someone to say. But unless you've lived in another person's body, who's to know what's the right thing to do? We can only look at, like, what is my desire for myself? People say, oh, you need to be more grounded. I'm like, well, what does that even mean? My grounded is different to your grounded. So, yeah, my main experience of the spiritual field is that it can actually still be used to enforce the status quo, actually even more surreptitiously than other modalities, because there's actually, I believe, less critical thought in the spiritual field, which for me is dangerous. And if you're critical in the spiritual field, they just stop talking to you, they block you. And so it's like we never get that accountability or devil's advocate. But where I think it will change is with the children. They are able to just blast through that with the level of consciousness they're coming in with. I believe a lot of them have come back from the world wars. A lot of them are the grandparents or great-grandparents, and when they come in, they're like, no. We don't respond to violence. We don't respond to threats. We're not going to bed. Not until you calm yourself down, Mum or Dad.
Oh gosh, that's Claire you're talking about.
So the clairvoyance and the psychic energy for me was really strong as a child, but absolutely turned that off in a hurry because of public school and stuff. However, it's come back with my children. I've only had children in the last few years, so since I was 35, I had 3 children in 5 years. And I allowed it to come back because I did the research. Intuition, psychic ability, it is the best way to protect your child. It gets high in pregnancy so that you can read situations because you are literally carrying this new life in you. And it stays high as you breastfeed, as you raise that child, because it is life or death. So intuition is highest in people who have to rely on their gut instincts for a reason, such as police officers, nurses, and parents. And so I knew that by allowing those abilities to come back, as terrifying as that was, would protect my children. And more than that, it would mean that I didn't harm my children, because the children come through with those abilities. And if they then meet me and I'm like, oh, I don't see ghosts, oh, I don't hear things, I'm muting my children. Often people are doing this by the time their kids are 2 or 3. Fairies don't exist. I went to the Swell Festival at Currumbin. My children believe in fairies because fairies are actually real, like so many stories. And there's a big tree they've built a fairy house on, and my son's, put his hand there to look for the fairy, which, they're in another realm, so that probably wasn't going to happen, but it was nice that he tried. And another little boy came past straight away and said that fairies don't exist. This is so stupid.
Oh, yeah.
And he said that, and I felt it was like a blade. It was just so violent the way he said it. This is a young boy, and that's clearly come from the people he's been around. And he was very much like, what? Total shoot. And my son's like, what?
Yeah.
And then I actually said to the boy straight away, fairies do exist.
Yeah.
And I just stood there at my full 6 foot height as a little boy, and I'm like, not sure how this is going to go. And then all his family came past, and I went, okay, I'm just going to let that go.
Yeah, dissipate, go.
Yeah, but if we don't protect our children at moments like this, they will never have the opportunity until perhaps much later on at a great expense to develop these limbs again, because your psychic ability is like antenna, and they do get stronger the more you use them, and you need to use them the most in a crisis. So in a society like Australia where relatively we're safe, it's true, you probably don't need intuition as much. But my family come from places where it's not safe. So they came in and they had it in spades. It's got its pros and cons, of course. If you don't channel that stuff, it just becomes anxiety and paranoia.
Yeah.
So look, there's pros and cons to everything I'm saying. And honestly, the best thing to do is to just start talking about it with people who are 5 years ahead of you or on that path. So they're not too judgy, they're still kind of interested. That 5-year interval is really helpful.
I love that story about your son, and he's so curious at that age, so clean and pure, and their consciousness. My middle child, she was jumping on the trampoline, and she said, "Mum, who are my spirit guides?" I said, "I don't know, darling." I said, "But you can explore that," and had a conversation with her. Anyway, the next day came back and we were jumping on the trampoline, and she said, "My teacher said there's no such thing as spirit guides." I'm like, oh. So she was exploring it like your son was with his fairies in the tree, and then it was stifled by someone of authority within her life. That's, not. So we got to keep working to keep them pure, I feel.
My invitation to you would be after this call to go to your daughter and tell her this story again. And sit down with her and have a go at drawing her spirit guides or calling them in.
Oh, that would be fun, actually. She'd love that.
It's not too late. They do it in lots of little kids yoga classes. Look, her spirit guides won't just be, animals and spirits. It'll be her ancestors. If you want to just start with some of the people who you really loved, whether she's got some great grandparents where they were really lovely people and they are guaranteed to be around her. So I would encourage you to go back there, because that sounds painful to me. And if we think about schools, and it's becoming even more so the case now, they punish teachers who put the child above the rules. So essentially, in some ways, they're inmates as well. And for them to challenge these things, they could lose their jobs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Look, I send my son to a school where they do believe in spirit guides.
Oh,
However,
wow.
it's a 2-hour commute a day, so there's a certain price you pay.
Yeah.
But I know, having looked at my son's contracts, that this is crucial for him. I definitely see him getting into trouble. And he needs to be able to read minds for a long and happy life. Look, not everyone needs those antennae, and that's probably why they drop off or we don't develop. But, if there's someone who wants to learn these things, I have so many blogs and videos on my site, and, I do classes. And look, there's a lot of people like me out there. I'm not the only one. I'm probably one of the most talkative and pushy ones. I'm not the only one.
I love the name you referred to yourself to earlier. Can you share it with the listeners? The pushy. Right.
Well, in palmistry, this finger here, the index finger, is the witchy finger, and it's also it's very much like people who love to tell others what to do. You can see my index finger is very long compared to my ring, so I am. I like to get my own way, that's for sure. And so I say to my clients, when they complain, what did you expect? I'm your friendly, pushy Asian lady. I'm your pal. That's what I'm here to do.
Here to get you those answers.
Well, one of the benefits of being Chinese, and it is actually that the culture is even the language. It's very to the point, and that's very suitable for something like a numerology or palmistry. Because if you color it too much with your interpretations, it does become, like a little dangerous or a little worrying. It needs to be delivered very clean. If you say to someone you're a number 5, your turning point is at 5 and 23, you need to give them some space. Not tell them what happened to them then, just give them some space and they'll go, oh my God. The ability to just keep it really clean, keep it really brief. It's really good for numerologists. A lot of numerologists are also musicians or singers, because of course there's the notes and the intervals. A lot of us, do work with our voices and do sound healing. So that there's a sort of cohort of people who love this kind of work.
It's beautiful. So if you were recommending to someone, if they want to explore numerology more and go deeper with all of this, what would be your advice to them?
Well, to sit down and write down their date of birth on a piece of paper and add it up from left to right, which gives them a double digit, unless they're a child where they may get a single digit, and to reflect on what happened to themselves at that age. So, for example, I'm the 27th of January 1981. So you add that up, it becomes 29. 29 for me was when I knew I had to leave my fundraising job, my relationship. I knew that actually I discovered some secrets about my family. basically there was this line of mental health and suicides in the women. And I just knew at that moment that if I didn't choose a career that was 100% my calling, I would not last very long because I don't have an ability to compromise. So there was a lot of wake-up calls at 29. And then the 11 and 2, I also had things happen. So that's the first place to start, is really reflect on what happened. It's not always fun and lovely things. Sometimes you have to go through your diary or really feel into your heart to find it. But it's a turning point in consciousness. A lot of people have babies or meet their partner at theirs, which is really nice. And I always say, tell your partner or baby that they were your milestone. And at a soul level, they'll understand you, even if you have to speak to them in spirit. That's really special. I love when that happens. The other thing they can do is look at my site, sarahit.com. I've got articles on every life path, videos, interviews. I've researched lots of famous people, what happened at their turning points. For example, the Queen is a 25-7, so she's healing her 7th chakra, her crown chakra. And at 25, her father dropped dead, and she became the Queen.
Wow.
That's interesting because the crown fell to her, literally, and 7 is about abrupt changes and spiritual promotions. And she herself never expected it, but at a soul level, she would have, having that life. Princess Diana was also 25-7. There's a lot of synchronicities. Meghan Markle, same life path, I think, is one of the other royal ladies, and has the same birthday as the Queen Mother. Once you start looking into it, it just does itself. I don't even have to explain it. It just becomes obvious that there is this language which underpins our world, which is easy to learn, useful to learn, and it will protect you. Because when people say, this is something that sometimes gets my goat. The children now are blooming 3 times earlier than us. My turning point was at 29. My son Ziggy, his birthday adds to a pure 9. He will know what he's here to do by 9. Wow. If I say to him, from my lens of bias, wait till you're in your late 20s, you're not going to know what you want until then, you're just being silly, listen to me. I cut off one of his antennae, and it may or may not grow back. So, I don't want people to feel so terrible if they're like, oh, I've done it. Just take the time today or tomorrow and go back and say, I did this thing. Let's start from that point again. But do you see what I mean? Like, Ziggy knows what he's going to do at 9. And numerology has given me that clarity so I can step back. And what also makes it powerful is the children's date of birth always reflects something in, especially the mother's timeline. For example, I'm a 29-11, and when my mother was 29, she was pregnant with me. It was a very hard time in her life. So I've literally come in to help women, especially when they have those big leaps of faith where they have to take on a lot of responsibility. Anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm rabbiting on, and you wouldn't believe it.
I've loved it.
The postman is standing outside my window trying to get my attention.
I have loved our conversation anyway, and you've made me super interested in the numbers, even more so than I already was. So I thank you so much for that and our beautiful conversation today.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. And I wanted to just mention that connection with the chakras.
Oh, yes.
So the system I'm teaching, it's partly influenced by some of the yoga practices. So 1 is the root chakra, 2 is the sacral, 3 is solar plexus, 4 is heart, 5 is throat, 6 is third eye, 7 is crown, 8 is karmic pattern, 9 is soul blueprint. This is all on my website. And what it means is as soon as you find your life path, you actually also know where your core wound will be. You can start doing some healing on that. And this also goes for codes that you continually see. So, for example, that 1111 code, it's not just a starseed awakening. It's talking about fundamental changes at the root chakra. Change of location, change of career, just change in like your health, lifestyle type stuff. And it's just a complete, ground zero time. Anyway, I've literally got a poster just standing there.
I'm going to let you go.
And it's making me laugh because I need to clearly go get this parcel.
I hope it's a good one.
Oh, thanks. Well, the 11 is the spiritual messenger. And I do often say I joke, don't shoot the spiritual messenger. Just give them a cookie and a glass of water. Okay, well, I'll see you again soon, Kate. I've got to dash.
Thank you, Sarah. Take care.
No worries. Bye.